The woods at the edge of town were quiet at dusk, the kind of quiet that made your thoughts louder. Amara walked that path every evening, not because she liked it, but because it was something to do. She kept her hood up, hands deep in her pockets, headphones in her ears. There was no music playing, hadn't been for weeks. It just helped people leave her alone. That evening, something was different. Just past the bend where the trees thickened, she noticed it. A car crashed into a tree, half hidden by overgrown branches. Smoke drifted in thin lines from the hood. Her first instinct was to keep walking. It wasn't her problem. Nothing ever was. But she stopped anyway. Inside the car, a woman sat slumped in the driver's seat. Blood was on her forehead, not much, but enough. Amara knocked once, gently, on the glass. The woman turned her head. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not fear, not panic, just surprise. Like neither had expected to see another person today, the window rolled down halfway. "You live around here?" the woman asked, her voice hoarse. "Kind of," Amara said. Her voice was flat, cautious. The woman looked at her carefully, then asked something strange. "Do you ever get tired of being invisible?" It caught Amara off guard. She blinked, said nothing, then opened the door and helped the woman out. They sat together on a fallen log nearby, waiting for a tow truck the woman had called just before the crash. The woman's name was Claire. She looked out of place, expensive boots, a coat too clean for the woods. Amara sat beside her but angled her body away. She didn't like people asking questions. Claire tried anyway. "Are you always out here alone?" Amara didn't look at her. "Are you always driving into trees?" It wasn't a joke, but Claire let the words hang in the air like one. She didn't push back. Just nodded, eyes on the fading light. "Not always," she said. "Just today." They sat in silence. A deer stepped into the clearing, pausing on the path. Its ears twitched, then it vanished into the trees. "My mom used to say deer meant safe passage," Amara murmured, not really intending to speak, like, "if they crossed your path, you'd be okay." Claire looked over gently. She didn't respond. Amara's voice was softer now. "She left 3 years ago, said she'd be back. I waited for 2 birthdays, stopped. Claire didn't touch her, didn't offer advice. She just looked at her, really looked, then said quietly, I left too, but it wasn't brave. It was just easier." The tow truck lights appeared in the distance, growing brighter. Neither of them moved, yet the next day, Amara walked the same path. The car was gone, but the memory lingered. Claire's coat was still around her shoulders. She wore it like a question she hadn't asked out later that week. She found Claire sitting outside a bookstore, scribbling in a leather notebook. She didn't wave, just looked up and nodded. Amara sat beside her without a word. They saw each other. Often after that, sometimes by accident, sometimes not. Claire started leaving coffee cups on the bench. Amara never thanked her, but she never left them behind either. One night they sat in a corner booth at a quiet diner. Rain tapped gently on the windows. Claire was writing. Amara was doodling on a napkin. "You're not from here," Amara said. "I didn't know I was looking for something," Claire replied. "Then I crashed and found me," Claire smiled. "Maybe just found stillness." They didn't talk about the big things, not often. But the air between them felt lighter with every meeting. On the morning of Amara's 18th birthday, she walked the path again. On the same log where they first sat, something was waiting, a wrapped package. Inside was a blank sketchbook, a photo of the deer that had crossed their path, and a note in Claire's handwriting, "Safe passage. Whenever you're ready, there's space in the passenger seat." Amara didn't cry, but she smiled. Just a little. And for the first time in a long time, she looked up instead of down. She kept walking, slower now, as if the world had softened around her. And maybe it had. Because she wasn't invisible anymore, Amara ran her fingers over the note again. The handwriting was smooth, careful, like someone who took their time with things. She folded it and tucked it inside her hoodie pocket, then opened the sketchbook. The first page was blank, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like an invitation. That day she sat longer on the log than she ever had. Her phone stayed off. No headphones. just the wind in the trees and the quiet rhythm of birds calling from branches. She began to draw. Not anything in particular, just lines at first, shapes, a tree, the outline of the deer. The cracked windshield dot for the first time in years. She didn't feel like she had to rush anywhere or defend herself from the world. Later. That week, Amara walked into the bookstore where Claire had been sitting before. The bell above the door jingled. It smelled like old paper and something sweet, maybe cinnamon. Claire wasn't there, but behind the counter, the shopkeeper handed her a package wrapped in brown paper. She said you might come in. Inside was a paperback book, The Little Prince. A note inside read, "For the quiet ones who see with their hearts." No name. Just a small, hand-drawn star in the corner of the page. Amara smiled, really smiled, and it surprised even her. They met again a few days later on the bus. Claire had moved into a small apartment above the post office, painting the walls white and letting in too much light. She was carrying 2 cups of tea and sat down beside Amara without asking. "You look different," Claire said softly. "I feel lighter." Claire handed her one of the cups. "Good, the world's heavy enough." They didn't talk much on the ride. But when Claire's stop came, Amara reached out and held her wrist for just a second. "Thanks," she said. "For what?" "For not fixing me?" Claire smiled, then stood. "You were never broken." The bus pulled away, and Amara watched her disappear into the brightness of the street, her coat flaring behind her like a quiet flag. Over the following months, Amara began to return to the world she had once slipped away from. She took up a part-time job at the bookstore, started drawing in public, little scenes, people in motion. She still walked the path in the woods, but now sometimes Claire walked beside her. They talked about little things. The way the leaves crunched underfoot. The way people change when they think no one is watching. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, but their silence was no longer empty. It was safe. There was no big moment. No announcement or revelation, just presence. A slow unfolding. 2 people carrying their own griefs, slowly choosing to share the weight. One evening in early spring, Claire handed Amara a small box wrapped in soft fabric. Inside was a set of keys to her car. "You drive now," Claire said. "It's your turn to take the wheel." Amara laughed, actually laughed, and it caught in the air like birdsong. As they sat in the car, Amara looked over at Claire, hand on the ignition. "I never thought I'd get out of here," she whispered. "You were never stuck," Claire replied. "You just needed someone to see the road with you." And as they pulled away from the edge of the woods, the trees parted just enough to let the sun spill through. The road was still winding, still uncertain, but it no longer felt lonely. It felt like beginning. It didn't leave town right away. There was no dramatic road trip, no runaway plan. Just small days stitched together, slow mornings, shared routines, silences that no longer needed filling. Claire took a job at the local library. She said it felt right to be around quiet people and worn-out stories. Amara kept drawing. She filled the sketchbook Claire had given her, page by page, not with perfect art, but with the little things she never wanted to forget. The shape of Claire's chipped mug, the curve of the bookstore window, the deer she once believed was a sign. On Tuesdays they'd sit in the same booth at the diner. The waitress stopped asking for their order. Tea for Claire, hot chocolate for Amara. They never stayed long, but they always left together. Sometimes they spoke about leaving, other towns, other skies, but there was no urgency. They were still learning what it meant to stay in a moment, in a connection, in a life you didn't have to escape from. One evening, Amara brought Claire to the trailer where she'd been living. She hadn't shown anyone before. It was small, cold, quiet, just a mattress on the floor and a makeshift shelf of paperbacks. Claire didn't say anything. She just walked inside and sat on the edge of the bed, looking around slowly. "It's not much," Amara said, hands in her sleeves. "But it was mine." Claire looked at her, eyes soft. "I'm proud of you for surviving." Amara looked down. "Sometimes I wish I didn't have to." Claire reached over and gently touched her hand. "I know." They stayed there for a while, not to mourn the past, but to honor it. The silence between them wasn't heavy that night. It was kind. full of breath and respect. Eventually, Amara moved in with Claire. Not because she needed to, not anymore, but because she wanted to. They painted the apartment walls a pale blue. Claire hated the color at first, but Amara liked how it caught the light in the morning. They left sticky notes for each other on the fridge, quotes, sketches, little jokes. Once, Claire left a note that simply said, "You are allowed to take up space." That one, Amara folded into her wallet. Time passed in small ways. Winter came and went. Claire taught Amara how to drive badly. They both laughed more than they yelled. The car from the crash, the one that started it all, still sat in the back lot. Dented but running, one spring morning, Amara stood by the driver's door, keys in hand. Claire was already in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, pretending to read a map. "You ready?" Claire asked. Amara nodded. "Yeah, I think so." They didn't have a destination, just a direction. The road ahead was long, uneven, a little wild, but they weren't afraid because they had each other, and sometimes that's enough, not to erase the pain, but to carry it together, to soften it with company, to make room for something new. They drove into the morning. A girl who once had no one, and a woman who once lost everything, now quietly, fiercely, showing up for each other, not heroes. Not saviors, just two people choosing kindness. And that was the story, simple. Quiet, but not small. The road was quiet. Amara kept both hands on the steering wheel. Her eyes fixed forward, but there was a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. The kind that comes from deep stillness, from feeling safe in your own skin for the first time in a long time. Claire had the window cracked open. Her fingers danced in the wind like a child's, light and aimless. She hadn't done that in years. For once, she wasn't thinking about where they were going, only about who she was going with. They stopped in a small town by the coast, a place with chipped paint on storefronts and locals who nodded as if they'd always been there. Claire found a bookstore tucked between a bakery and a laundromat. Amara wandered off to the water. They agreed to meet back in an hour. No rush, no checking in. Just trust. At the beach, Amara walked barefoot on the sand, sketchbook under her arm. The waves moved in slow, steady breaths. She sat on a piece of driftwood and began to draw. Not the ocean, but Claire's hand, the one she'd seen out the car window. It had meant something to her, that open hand. That freedom, when they reunited. Amara handed Claire the sketch. "It reminded me of the first time you reached out to me," she said quietly. Claire studied the drawing, her thumb brushing the lines gently. "I didn't know how to help you then," she said. "You didn't help," Amara said softly. "You stayed. That was enough." They stayed in that town for a few days, shared a small room above the bakery, ate breakfast outside on the curb, knees tucked close, coffee in mismatched mugs. Claire started writing again, not in her notebook, but on loose napkins and receipts. Amara kept drawing. On the third night, she drew a picture of the trailer. Not the way it looked, but the way it had felt, quiet, cold, waiting. They didn't talk about going back, but they didn't need to, on the morning they left. Claire pinned one of her notes to the corkboard in the cafe where they'd had tea. Every day, it read, "To the girl I once found in the woods, thank you for letting me be lost with you." They drove inland toward trees again, not because they were trying to find something, but because they liked the stillness of it. One evening, they stopped by a lake where fog rolled low across the surface. Amara skipped stones while Claire sat on the dock, her feet just above the water. "What would you have done?" Claire asked. "If I hadn't been in that car?" Amara didn't answer right away. She tossed another stone, watched it ripple out. "Probably nothing," she said. "Probably just walked past, gone back to silence." Claire nodded. "I'm glad you didn't," she said. "Me too." Night fell gently. They wrapped themselves in blankets from the trunk and leaned against each other, saying nothing more. It was never about fixing. It was about presence, a kind of love that didn't demand anything but honesty, a kind of healing that happened slowly. In the pauses between words, a few weeks later, they returned to the town where it all began, just for a visit. The woods were greener now, the air warmer. On the log where they first sat, Someone had carved a name, not theirs, but still, it felt like a marker, a memory left behind. They didn't stay long, just enough to breathe it in. To honor it, before they left, Amara took out a small folded piece of paper and tucked it under a rock on the log. The drawing she left was simple. 2 figures, side by side, walking into the trees, no destination, just together, and that was the story, still unfinished, still unfolding, carried quietly in the hands of 2 people who had once felt invisible. Now, seen, now steady, now moving forward, softly, bravely, always. The day they left the woods for the second time, the sky was overcast but soft. The kind of gray that made colors more vibrant, the red of Claire's scarf, the navy of Amara's jacket, the pale green of new spring leaves. They didn't speak much on the drive. They didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of memory, of quiet gratitude, of things already understood. They passed a sign for a small art gallery on the edge of a nearby town. Amara slowed the car. Want to stop? She asked. Claire looked over, surprised. You want to? Amara shrugged, but her lips curved into a small smile. Might as well see what the world's showing today. Inside, the gallery was empty, except for a quiet man sweeping the floor and the soft hum of a heater. The walls were covered with paintings and sketches, most of them rough, raw, full of feeling. Claire lingered near a piece of a girl standing on the edge of a dock, arms out, wind in her hair. Amara stood beside her, silent. You like it? Claire asked. Amara nodded. She looks like she's not afraid of falling. She isn't. Amara said. She knows someone will be there if she does. Claire didn't answer. She just reached over and took Amara's hand. They held it loosely, like a thread, not pulling, just connecting. That evening, they stayed in a small room above a coffee shop. The windows looked out over the hills. Claire made tea while Amara sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through her sketchbook. Near the back was a drawing she'd forgotten about, a cracked windshield, branches framing a startled face behind the glass. She handed it to Claire. Do you ever think, Amara asked softly, how weird it is that I found you like that? Claire looked down at the page. Her thumb brushed the corner. I don't think I found you in that moment, she said. I think I remembered you. Amara tilted her head. What do you mean? Claire leaned back, her voice gentle. There was something about you, even then, the stillness, the way you looked at me. It felt like I'd met you before, not in this life, maybe, but somewhere. Amara smiled, not wide, but real. Maybe we were both just waiting. Maybe we still are, Claire said. They drank tea on the windowsill, legs tucked close, watching headlights flicker down the road below like fireflies. The world was still, but not stuck. Days passed, then weeks. Some were soft, some were hard. They had small disagreements, over directions, over dinner, over nothing at all. But even in silence, they stayed close. They had learned how to remain. Amara started mailing her drawings. She sent one to the bookstore, one to the waitress. At the diner, one to the shopkeeper who had handed her Claire's note. None of them wrote back. That was okay. The giving was the point. Claire, too, began writing again, not to escape, not to explain, just to name things. She filled small pages with fragments, the smell of Amara's hair after rain, the sound of her breath when she's dreaming, the way healing doesn't make a sound but still moves. One morning, Amara woke early and found Claire outside on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunrise. Couldn't sleep? Amara asked, settling beside her. Claire shook her head. Didn't want to miss this. They sat shoulder to shoulder. No words for a while. Then Claire said, You know, we never really talk about the future. Amara looked at her. Does that worry you? Claire shook her head slowly. No, I think we're just delving it slowly, without needing to name it. Amara leaned against her, eyes still on the horizon. I think that's the only way I've ever wanted to build anything. She said. The sun rose, slow and gold and patient. And the world turned again, soft beneath their feet, not perfect. Not Predictable, but shared, and enough. That evening, they drove out past the hills to a spot Claire had found on the map, a clearing where the stars were said to be clearest. It was a long, winding drive, the kind where silence felt natural, the kind where you watch the trees pass and feel a sense of time that doesn't rush you. When they arrived, they laid out a blanket on the grass. The sky was still purple, holding on to the last stretch of dusk. Amara lay on her back, her arms folded under her head, while Claire lit a small lantern and opened her notebook. They didn't say much at first. Breeze moved gently through the grass. The moon rose quietly behind the trees. Then Claire spoke. When I first left everything behind, she said, I didn't think I deserved to be found. I thought disappearing was the kindest thing I could do. Amara didn't turn her head. She just listened. I used to think love was something you gave until you were empty, Claire continued. But with you, it's different. It doesn't drain me. It returns. There was a long pause. Then Amara, voice soft, said, You're the only person who's ever let me exist without asking me to explain myself first. Claire looked over. Amara's eyes were open, watching the stars blink into being one by one. Sometimes I still feel invisible, Amara admitted. Even with you, but it doesn't scare me anymore. It just reminds me I'm healing. Claire reached for her hand. No rush, no pressure, just a quiet offering. They stayed like that for hours, wrapped in a silence that had become their native language. Later that night, when they drove back into town, Amara asked Claire if she remembered the first thing she ever said to her. Claire smiled. Do you ever get tired of being invisible? Amara nodded. I didn't realize then how tired I really was. She glanced over, her voice low but steady. I'm not tired anymore. The days that followed were ordinary. But now ordinary felt sacred. They learned each other's patterns, how Claire hummed when she folded laundry, how Amara needed quiet in the mornings, how they both loved the smell of rosemary and rain. They argued sometimes, not often. But when they did, it never felt like leaving was on the table. That was new. That was rare. They returned to the woods again that fall, not out of nostalgia, but because it had become part of them. A place that held a beginning, they sat on. The same log. It had aged, softened at the edges. Claire ran her fingers over the carvings someone had left. Amara pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket. It was another drawing. Two silhouettes, side by side, facing the woods. One carried a lantern. The other held nothing but looked toward the light. Claire held it in both hands, tracing the lines. You're the lantern, she whispered. Amara shook her head, smiling gently. No, you are. They left the drawing under the rock again, a new piece. In the same place. Not to hold on, but to give back. To say, we were here. And we're still going. That winter, Claire asked Amara a quiet question as they walked through town, snow falling around them in soft spirals. Do you ever think this is it? Amara looked at her. What do you mean? This this little life, these quiet days, do you think this is enough? Amara thought for a moment, then said, It's not just enough. It's everything. Claire exhaled. That kind of breath. That feels like release. Like warmth returning to a place inside you that forgot how to hold it. They kept walking, two people. One lantern. No map. Only trust, only time, only this soft, shared unfolding of life. And that was the story, still being written, still held between them. Gently, fully, quietly, spring crept in without asking. The trees outside their apartment bloomed with white blossoms that looked like snow, and the smell of early rain lingered in the hallway. The coffee shop downstairs reopened its patio, and Claire and Amara sat there sometimes with their notebooks and tea, saying very little, watching the world reawaken. They had fallen into a rhythm. Not a routine exactly, but a soft kind of gravity that pulled them toward the same places, the same silences. Some mornings, Claire would write while Amara sketched. Other days, they simply sat beside each other, shoulder to shoulder, letting the quiet hold them. Time no longer felt like something they were racing against. It felt like a place they lived inside together. One afternoon, Claire brought home a box of old postcards she found at a thrift shop. She spread them out across the floor and invited Amara to choose any she liked. What for? Amara asked, kneeling beside her. I thought we could write letters we'll never send. Claire said Amara considered that. Then nodded. So they did. Each night that week, they picked a postcard and wrote something, a memory, a fear, a wish. Not to each other, but to the versions of themselves they had once been. Sometimes they read them out loud. Sometimes they folded them and tucked them into books like secrets. One card had a faded photo of Lighthouse. On it, Amara wrote, I used to think no one would ever find me, but now I know someone already had, even before I believed I deserved it. Claire didn't speak when she read it. She just reached over and rested her hand over Amara's. They left that postcard on the windowsill. Let the light touch it every morning. One weekend, they took a train to a nearby city, bigger, busier. It felt strange at first. The crowds, the motion, but they held on to each other. A gentle kind of anchor. They visited a museum filled with quiet exhibits, letters from strangers, shoes of travelers, scraps of unfinished songs. It felt like a place built for people who understood fragments. Claire paused at a display of old journals and whispered, We're all just trying to be known. Amara, standing beside her, replied, And still hoping to be loved after. That night, in the hotel room, they lay side by side on a small bed, facing opposite directions but reaching behind to touch each other's hands. I think I used to dream of something louder, Amara said quietly. Big love, big change, big escape. And now? Claire asked. Now I dream of mornings like this, Amara said, of staying, of someone knowing my silence and not trying to fill it. Claire turned onto her side, looking at her. The kind of love that stays, Amara nodded, and the kind I never knew I could have. Back home, the days kept passing. Claire started leaving small notes for Amara again, not because she had to, but because she loved the ritual of it. On the bathroom mirror, you are still becoming. On the inside of Amara's sketchbook, there is no rush. Amara returned the notes in her own way, sketches left on Claire's pillow, corners of receipts marked with drawings of open doors, rising suns, 2 pairs of shoes left at a doorstep. 1 evening after dinner they danced slowly in the kitchen, no music playing, just the sound of rain outside and the hum of the fridge. Amara rested her head against Claire's shoulder. You saved me, she whispered. Claire shook her head gently. No, I just didn't walk past, Amara smiled. That was enough. Some stories don't end, they don't peak. They unfold, like a hand slowly opening, like breath settling in the chest, like love that doesn't need a name to be real. This story, theirs, was still growing, quiet and brave, one shared moment at a time, and that was everything.